welcome back to Women Without Borders, where we listen deeply to the experience that shape gender, migration, and displacement. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk about a community that live in a profound state of uncertainty, which are the Afghan refugee women in Malaysia. So, in today's episode, we are incredibly honored to share with you guys that we are able to partner with Greater Action in this episode of our podcast. So, Greater Action is a remarkable grassroots women led nonprofit organization based in Bandar Baru, Ampang, Malaysia, that's driving real changes in refugee and migrant women, especially the Afghan women in Malaysia. So, since its founding in 2020, Greater Action has been on a powerful mission to restore dignity, build confidence, and create sustainable opportunities for refugee women through skills training, through access to essential healthcare and education. Thank you so much, Greater Action, for such an inspiring work and collaborating with us on this podcast. For more information on Greater Action and their initiative, please visit their website at www.greateraction.org or visit their social media on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Greater Action. For further inquiries on how you can help this organization, feel free to email them at greateractioncenter@gmail.com or contact them via WhatsApp at 018-9732-705. So since the fall of Kabul, the capital city of Afghanistan in August 2021, and the takeover of Taliban in the capital city itself, we have watched as the situation deteriorated and the girls in Afghanistan has collapsed and lose their autonomy over their own bodies and their own rights in their life. So we see women are not allowed to go to school, they are not allowed to go to work, and in fact, they're not even allowed to speak in public. And there's an incredibly powerful and important book written by Malala Yousafzai that had shown the drastic changes that has taken place since the fall of Kabul in August 2021 and the takeover of Taliban. Okay, moving back to the situation in Malaysia. You know, in Malaysia, the conversations has been happening about the legal status of this refugee, especially on the issue of allowing the UNHCR registered refugee to work legally in Malaysia. This is quite a big deal in Malaysia, you know, because the refugees here, including these Afghan women, are living in a state that many of us advocates call as a legal limbo, whereby they are not recognized by the Malaysian law itself. They have no automatic rights to work or access to education and even the most basic access to healthcare. So I would say that this limbo is not actually just a legal policy debate, but this legal limbo that they are living in actually shapes the daily life of these Afghan women. So in today's episode, we're not just going to talk about displacement and using this refugee as a case study, but we are going to talk about how laws, borders, and these social systems are actually gendered in Malaysia. We are going to talk about how the policy in Malaysia decides who gets access, who are seen as invisible or visible, and who are positioned as essential in Malaysia, but still unprotected under the law of Malaysia itself. So we will also share the experience of these Afghan women through their lens of displacement and unbelonging as what they have lived in so far. As we start the conversation, we will invite you all listeners to think about what does legal invisibility mean when it's experienced through a woman's body. And also, how do reproductive health, work, and rights intersect with displacement that they are facing right now? And most importantly, we want you to ask yourself, how might the feminist approach all this while can help in reimagining the protection and belonging beyond the recognition of these women and citizenship. So with that, let's move on into our discussion on Afghan refugee women in Malaysia today and what their experiences has tell us about gender, about displacement, and belonging. So with that in mind, let's move into our discussion of Afghan refugee women in Malaysia and what their experiences tell us about gender, displacement, and belonging. So firstly, let's invite our first panel, Blake. to share with us the experience of being a refugee from the lens of an Afghan woman. So, Blake, can you share with us what the Afghan women are actually had to experience after they had to flee from Afghanistan?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the insightful introduction. So, when we talk about displacement, it's important to begin by asking why Afghan women were forced to leave in the first place. For many women, leaving Afghanistan was not a choice, but a necessity. Years of war, followed by the rules of Taliban, and created an environment where women's life become increasingly restricted and unsafe. So, women face direct threats to their bodily autonomy and also dignity. For example, forced marriage, surveillance over women's bodies, and strict limitations on movement become part of their daily life. So education, work, and work opportunities for women and girls were severely restricted and completely banned even. So under these conditions, staying meant losing not only freedom but also the possibility of a future. So for many Afghan women, fleeing it was the only way to protect themselves and also their children.
Okay, so yes, I do agree that by fleeing was the only way to escape from, all the restrictions and all the difficulties and hardship. But the question is, what happened when they flee from Afghanistan and when they reach Malaysia? Does their displacement and struggles continue here, or are they free from all the struggles and hardships now?
Displacement does not end at the moment of their arrival in Malaysia. So when Afghan women reach Malaysia, they often find safety or from their immediate violence, from their own countries, but not that security, because as you said just now, Malaysia does not legally recognize refugee status,
Yes.
right? Okay, so which places Afghan women in a state of legal invisibility. So without formal refugee status, everyday life becomes a continuous negotiation. Like here, continuous means every day, every single act is a negotiation for survival and also for dignity and belonging as well. So this legal invisibility is not experienced in some kinds of dramatic moments, but actually can be found in daily actions and everyday decisions. Maybe. Afghan women constantly assesses risk in ordinary activities, whether it is safe to go to see a doctor and whether it is safe to send their children to schools, and at the risk of revealing their status, and their family may undergo checking for their status. So that's really tough situation. Yeah.
When we talk about displacement and refugees and them fleeing from Afghanistan to find security and protection, do you really think that gender plays an important role in shaping their daily struggles and life?
Yeah, I believe that those kind of experience are actually deeply shaped by the gender. Yeah, so Afghan women often carry the responsibility of sustaining family, the care for children and their relatives, and also injured family members, while navigating the economic insecurity and social exclusion. Yeah, and those kind of displacement disrupts not only their livelihoods but also identities. So women who were once students, workers, or some skilled professionals find those identities interrupt or even being erased because of the arrival. Yeah. So the loss is not always a sudden or dramatic. Instead, it's what have just mentioned is cumulative. So opportunities slowly narrowed, recognition phase, and aspirations are repeatedly postponed.
So far, we have talked about displacement, we have talked about their experience, their roles, and the struggles that they have to face while being displaced, right?
Yeah.
But based on your experience and researches so far, how do you think these women refugees, especially the Afghan, how do you think they are holding up and surviving in this, I would say, Malaysia unfair system and policy?
From what I have read and learned so far, although these women have to carry so much burden and worries, they are not defined by such words like vulnerability or kind of things. What the work of the organization, the Greater Action reviews, is how women actively deep survival strategies under the displacement, and through some kinds of skill training like bakery, hand tailoring, and the craft making those kind of stuff, Afghan women rebuild stability in their daily life. So these kind of activities are not simply income generating. They actually restore their confidence and their routine and sense of control of their lives. So learning a skill and producing something of value and contributing financially to the household allow women to reclaim dignity and in the environment where choices are like otherwise limited. More importantly, under those women's experience in this context requires moving beyond the trauma-centered narratives,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So while suffering is real, focusing only on the pain risks overlooking the women's strengths, right, and their capability and their resilience towards life. So rather than repeatedly asking women to recount their suffering, I think greater action centers empowerment through skills, works, and dignity, also community. So this approach reframes the displacement not only a loss, but as a space where dignity, agency, and solidarity and hope can be still cultivated.
Yeah. I second that. After much guidance, advice, and sharing from Greater Action, we can see that their initiatives really focuses on empowering these Afghan women rather than just asking for sympathy, right? And I think it is very important for us to understand that their experience are not just a one-time event, as you said just now, but instead it is actually a persisting conditions that keep on going daily. Okay, so we've talked so much about this Afghan women shared life experiences, and I keep on mumbling about displacement. So to ensure that we understand more about what is displacement and how it affects these Afghan women in their daily life and their current struggles, I would like to welcome Nourish into the podcast. So to start off, Nourish, can you explain to all our listeners about, what is displacement?
Okay, so displacement, right? Okay, building on that, right? I would say we unpack what displacement actually means. Okay, actually for Afghan women living in Malaysia. So now when we hear displacement, most people immediately think of moving from one country to another, but it's actually much more than that. Okay, it's very complex, and it's not just packing a suitcase and and leaving. It's like if that were the case, of course, we'll all be displaced at some point, right? And I would say displacement involves social, emotional, and legal ruptures. It's about losing your communities, your routine, I would say, your sense of safety, and sometimes even your identity itself. And so even after someone escaped danger, the feeling of being out of place often stay with them. Another key point is that displacement is not just one-time event. It doesn't just end when someone crosses a border. For many refugees, I would say displacement is prolonged and ongoing. People may wait years for documents, the right to work, or legal recognition. It's like I would say it's a life in limbo. And as what Anis has said just now, when uncertainty isn't just occasional but a daily routine. Displacement is lived in a small, persistent ways, and the anxiety of going to clinic, going on, you want to send your children to school, or the constant worry about the futures. So it's less about movement and more about how social and legal systems shape every day of their life.
So when you say that displacement is more about how the social structures and legal system shape the daily life of these refugee women, do you think that this experience of them as refugee are heavily gendered, as what Blake had said just now?
I believe so, because based on the experience of these refugees that had shared all around the world, we can see that the displacement is actually deeply gendered. And from the lens of these Afghan women, they had to face risk. That means often to not including gender-based violence, okay? And limited access to education and work, reproductive health insecurity, and an increase of caregiving burdens. So these challenges don't disappear. after fearing conflict. In fact, they often become more intense while they are being displaced. And then particularly in countries when legal protection are limited, people need to realize that this isn't just unfortunate, this is the reflection of structural inequalities. Displacement is highlight how laws, borders, and social system are gendered.
As what I see, we have seen the point of view of these women in a global perspective. But what about Malaysia? Because we all know that Malaysia is not a signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, right? How do you think that our current policy plays into shaping the experiences of these Afghan women in Malaysia?
Okay, so let's zoom in Malaysia. Okay, as you said, Malaysia is not signatory to the 1951 Refugees Convention, meaning refugees aren't legally recognized under the national law.
Yes.
So what does this mean is that I would say this woman has no legal right to work, I would say, and limited access to healthcare and constant fear of detention. For Afghan women, this legal invisibility magnifies their daily risks. Even simple things like seeking medical care, enrolling children in school requires navigating uncertain and social vulnerability. Critically, this isn't just bureaucratic inefficiency. It reflects political priorities and where academic stability and national control are weighed above human rights.
Yes, I agree. But theoretically, we know how gender actually shapes the livelihood of these women. But practically, so how do we make people understand that gender really shapes and, as you said, magnifies the risk that they had to face every day?
To make this concrete, let's just imagine what it feels to be them. Okay, imagine an Afghan woman having to flee war, hoping for safety, but in Malaysia, displacement continues in new forms. Okay, like her daily life will feel like a tightrope. Her having to step out to work, visit a clinic, or send her children to school can feel risky. And emotionally, there's a loss of home, community, and also culture. Like imagine having to navigate daily life where even small choice is considered by law and don't recognize by yourself and by the society you are in, by the system, and don't fully includes you. And it's not abstract. It's like it's real women living real uncertainty, and it's ongoing every single day. So I would say, so what we want to emphasize today, displacement isn't just moving from one place to another. I would say it's an ongoing, it's an layer of experience and shaped by gender, law, and also structures.
Thank you, Nourish, for the very comprehensive, I'd say, explanation on the theory and to make people understand what displacement is all about and how it affects the Afghan women refugee in Malaysia all this while. Okay, so when we talk about moving from one country to another, about one being displaced, of course, we cannot run away from the topics of feeling unbelong in that one place. So that brings us to our next question. When we say that these Afghan women are not recognized by the law, especially in Malaysia, do you feel like it's easier for them to settle down, move forward, live like they belong in our country? Or do you think that they will still feel unbelong?
In academic circles, we talk a lot about the theory of belonging versus non-belonging, but let's strip away the jargon. Belonging isn't just about having a roof over your head. It's about being recognized by the society around you. It's a right to have a bank account or send your kids to school and to walk down the street without looking over your shoulder. For many refugees, non-belonging is a state of being permanent stranger in a place you lived for years. This feeling of non-belonging isn't just about an accident or the refugees, they overthinking that they're not welcome. Unfortunately, the state and feeling of not belonging is actually structurally produced, specifically in today's context within Malaysia. As what you mentioned before, Malaysia isn't a signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, and therefore, these women are legally classified as illegal immigrants. For some, they would feel like it's just a label to classify who are Malaysian, locals, and who are not. But what people do not realize is that this isn't just a label, it's a wall.
When you said a wall, what do you mean by wall?
So the wall is what we said as the barrier that creates legal invisibility. When you are legally invisible, you don't exist in the eyes of the government,
Yes.
which means no access to public health care or formal education. It's a life of conditional tolerance where you are allowed to stay, but deeply, you are never truly accepted within the local community.
Yes.
Yeah. But in today's episode, we don't want to just focus on their sufferings, but we want to highlight their resilience and their spirit to keep fighting towards freedom and dignity. While we were doing our research, we learned about Great Action. They've set up a space where these invisible women can learn long-term skills like professional baking, sewing, and even art. Take Karimar, for example, she's an artist who lost an eye in a bombing attack in Afghanistan. She could have chosen to stay invisible once she fled from Afghanistan and reached Malaysia, but instead, she chose to amplify her voice and give back to the community. Through her art, she's reclaiming her identity and her dreams of being an international artist. Every time they sell a cake or a dress, they aren't just earning money. They are breaking the cycle of unbelonging.
I do have to agree with you that Greater Action has really contributed a lot to the refugee women in Malaysia. But talking about gender, does gender really matter in this issue of being a refugee?
Oh yeah, of course. We also had to talk about how gender makes their experience even tougher for these women. I had to emphasize that the other has said throughout the interview what about gender really matters. Afghan women, they are refugees. They are often economically at a disadvantage, and they are faced with traditional gender restrictions. They have to carry the weight of the whole families while navigating a society that treats them as illegal. And this is why we believe that supporting these women isn't just about like charity or or empathy, but it's about empowerment. When we support their work, we help them move from being victims.
Okay, so far we have talked about displacement and we've talked about not belonging or unbelonging. So this brings us to the next important question. What happens when the system does not recognize this community? So to shift from theory and to practicality, this is where we believe NGO really matters, not as people coming in as a savior or to save these people, but as spaces where women can find support, platform to rebuild their confidence, and also regain some control over their life. So Iris, can you share with us what have you gotten so far after the conversations that you have with Miss Julie and Greater Action, and how do they actually help these Afghan women to regain control over their lives?
Sure. So far, we have talked about displacement as a concept, how it's prolonged, gendered, and shaped by legal systems. What I want to focus on now is what happens after those structures settle into everyday life. Because displacement doesn't only show up in policies or borders, it shows up in how women wake up, work, and learn, and try to hold on to dignity in a place where they are present but not fully recognized. When I talked to Miss Julie, what stood out to me wasn't only what these Afghan women had lost, but what they were actively rebuilding every single day in a place where one is physically present, yet socially and legally invisible. That becomes the point at which NGOs like Creator Action have very specific and vital roles to play, not as saviors, but as facilitators of what women are already doing.
We've been talking about greater action, and I've mentioned about Miss Julie does quite a few times. Can you introduce to us who is the inspiring woman that is championing greater action itself?
Of course. So Creator Action is led by Mrs. Julie Das, a French educator who has spent over 2 decades in Malaysia working alongside refugee communities and grassroots initiatives across South and Southeast Asia. Mrs. Julie had begun her journey in 2009 with Diaspora in Kolkata, supporting children's access to learning, healthcare, and nutrition. Over the years, she contributed to youth education, vocational training, and social enterprise development. In 2020, in response to the pandemic's devastating impact on refugee families, Julie founded Creator Action to address urgent gaps in education, livelihoods, and healthcare. Today, the organization supports over 250 families, centering African refugee women through education, skill building, emergency health care, and community empowerment.
Okay, so do you think that it is safe to say that greater action does not provide platform for charity, but instead it provides platform to help empower these women in surviving their daily lives?
Yes, exactly. Creator Action provides platform for these women to market their work, reach people beyond their immediate community, earn income with dignity. And that distinction really matters. We need to be careful not to romanticize resilience. These women are not strong because suffering is beautiful. They are strong because they have had no choice. Therefore, the goal of NGO work should never be to celebrate hardship, but to reduce how much hardship defines a person's life. These initiatives are quite acts of resistance in a country where refugees typically experience legal and social unbelonging. Creator Action's approach has power because it does not pretend unbelonging does not exist. Instead, it helps women negotiate it by building skills, income, confidence, and the community. Supporting Creator Action is not about saving Afghan women. It's about supporting the work they are already doing themselves.
Thank you for sharing that. So what really stands out from Irish sharing is that how displacement shows up in our everyday life, as what the other panel has shared just now, and how NGO like Greater Action respond in ways that center around dignity, around empowerment, around choice, and also agency. And this brings us directly to why today's conversation matters beyond theory. So next, we want to venture on how our listeners can be part of this incredible work by Greater Action, and how supporting Greater Action through our fundraising efforts can help to turn your listening into real-time effort and support and tangible effect towards the refugee women and girls in Malaysia, specifically the Afghan women. So Divya, maybe you can help to explain to our listeners what our project and fundraising with Greater Action is all about.
So we're having this fundraiser in support of Greater Action, the grassroots women-led organization that we've been talking about throughout the podcast. So if the discussion resonates with you, then please do help donate to us. But wait, before we talk about how to donate, it's important to recognize what Greater Action has already done on their own and why supporting them matters. So since 2020, Greater Action has been working directly with migrant and refugee women, particularly Afghan women, with things that are basically overlooked otherwise. So that's, access to healthcare, access to education, skills training, anything that can give them a sense of livelihood and dignity. Through these programs, these Afghan women have been able to gain practical skills. They've been able to build upon their existing confidence. And they've also been able to create sustainable livelihoods for themselves, often for the first time since they've been displaced. But the impact of this work, it doesn't stop with just the individual women themselves. So when we give to these individual women, these refugee women, we are not just giving to them, we're also giving to their family, we're giving to their children, we're giving to their community. So in this way, everyone can feel supported. At the broader level, initiatives like this challenge the harmful narratives that refugees are like a burden. And this can instead show how care, inclusion, and opportunity can benefit the whole society as a whole. Here's how you can support. So, you know how earlier we were talking about like the French tarts and like the
like
sewing
them
clothes?
cooking and baking. Yes.
So that is what we want to leverage in this fundraiser. When you give somebody the opportunity to learn a skill, it automatically dignifies them. Greater Action has this amazing initiative for like $250 a month that can like sustain a girl's education. This initiative could help provide like vital access to learning, to confidence building, and the tools that, you know, this girl needs to thrive and not just survive.
Yes.
But wait, if that sounds like it's too much, if you go to their website, you will see that they have a lot of vocational training, right? You can also purchase the things that they've made or the food that they've made as a way of supporting their vocational training so that they can become better. Your support isn't just a donation at the end of the day.
So that's great. That means that you can specifically choose which cause that you want to donate or help from. Let's say if you want to donate for education, you can do for the 250 ringgit per month to help a girl's education, because, you know, education is everything. In addition to that, they do also provide catering services. So for you guys out there who wants to, you know, have like some kind of like an office potluck or a family, you know, gathering or party or whatsoever, please, you can actually order these great pastries and food from Greater Action and from these women themselves through the link that's provided in the bio down below. We have been talking about donating a big sum in a consistent way, but for some people, especially us students, we don't really have, you know, that economic advantage to be able to donate consistently in a huge amount per month. So what can others do to help empower this group of community and women refugees?
Of course, I totally understand
Yes.
that, you know, we don't have that kind of resources or
Yeah.
capacity, but you can also donate 10 ringgit or 25 ringgit or 50 ringgit or 100 ringgit or even more if you can. We'll link two links. One will be the donation that's directly to the website, and one is a Google form, and we kindly ask that you fill in the Google form if you are donating on the website. We will also include the same details in the Google form. This is just because we need to keep track of the amount that is going to them as a, you know, records purpose, because this will be reported.
Yes.
As a small token of appreciation, larger contributions of donations will be acknowledged with handcrafted items made by the Afghan women through Greater Action's livelihood programs, as a reminder that your support directly values women's skills and labor. We are aiming to raise at least 500 ringgit, which is not a huge amount, but it's intentional. And we believe that collective, modest contributions can still create meaningful change. It's really important to us for you to know where your money is going.
Yes.
All funds are going straight directly to Greater Action. None of the donations will pass through any of our accounts at any point. Accountability and transparency matters, especially when we're working with communities that are already vulnerable. We also want to briefly talk about ethical engagement and consent. This fundraiser is being shared with respect to the community and in collaboration with Greater Action so that they can do Greater Action. And if you're not able to donate, it's completely fine. Any amount we genuinely consider as valuable. You can still support by sharing this fundraiser or passing it on to someone who you know will be able to contribute, or even if they're interested. Thank you so much for listening and for caring and for standing in solidarity with refugee and migrant women in ways that are ethical, intentional, and grounded in dignity.
So, as we come to the end of today's episode of our podcast, we want to pause and reflect on what we have just heard. Not just as information, but as lived realities. Throughout this conversation, we've learned that displacement is not just a single moment of light, nor does it end when someone reaches a place of safety. We've also seen how deeply gender shapes these experiences, you know, from restricted access to healthcare, to work, to education, to the emotional labor of holding families together under this uncertainty and legal limbo. So this is where the work of organizations like Greater Action has become so vital, not because they save refugee women, but because they create platform for women to reclaim their agency, to reclaim their confidence, and to rebuild livelihoods and reimagine futures of their own at their own terms. So supporting these women is not an act of charity, but it's an act of justice. As what our panel said just now, migrants does not need any fixing. They need the agency to shape their own futures and find their own identity. So if you feel like today's episode moved you and resonates with you, we encourage you to continue engaging with the community, whether by learning more, by sharing these stories, or by supporting organizations like Greater Action, or simply carrying this perspective into your everyday conversations that refugees are not victim and they should be treated with dignity and respect. So thank you for listening with openness and care. This has been Women Without Borders, where we listen deeply to stories on displacement, migration, and belonging. Until next time, thank you.